Good morning and happy Tuesday 10 at 10. I am your host, Richard Charpentier, and every Tuesday we get your questions, the bakers, and we try our best to answer your question and help you and guide you through any issues you might have. So let's get started. The first question is from someone asking about burger buns, and they've been having issues with their buns, and they have a new line that they're trying to build, and the dough goes through the divider, rounder, and molder formed by 3 rollers, and the dough runs perfectly well on the line, and it seems to be sealed and well in good shape. So their issue is they don't have a good oven spring, and the finished product dimension are the same as they were before baking, so they don't get a lot of movement. We use enzyme, ascorbic acid, and vital wheat gluten that are baked at 292, and no steam is being utilized. What do you think that affects the oven spring? Great question. So oven spring is basically more than just one thing. It has to start with what protein quality you have and protein quantity you have in your formulation. How much sugar? Do you have emulsifiers? How much do you mix it? What's the absorption of your dough? And what you're saying at 292, when you bake it, it's a low bake, so that should be 392, should be closer to 400, maybe the oven. And that's something, it's more than just one thing. So that's what I'm saying is if you're trying to get help on that, I recommend you go to Bakerpedia on the bakery resources and get a consultant to help you and guide you through. It'll take, a couple hours maybe to guide you through, review your formula, but you'll be better off. There's a lot of, factors. And also, are you using a pan? Are you greasing the pan? How much dusting flour? So all of those other factors will make it where you don't get the results you want. Remember, it's about finding something that works and create consistency within your system, or trying as best as you can and to get it. But good question. Moving on to the next question. Someone wants to know, can you tell what emulsifier makes an eggless cake soft, very light and fluffy? So we're talking about a no eggs cake formulation, which you see some, and to make it light and fluffy with no eggs, and what emulsifier. So in terms of emulsifier that you can use, there's plenty. There is the PGME, there's the mono and dye, there's lecithin, or sunflower lecithin is actually a good emulsifier that I would start with. But it has also start with, and you're not gluten free, you're just no eggs. It has to start with what flour do you use? Do you use a soft wheat? Do you have any protein? How much sugar do you use? And do you have any gums? What kind of gums are you using, or hydrocolloids are you using? Do you have specialty starches? And also to, because it's going to be part of R&D, and it's a trial and error that you have to put through to understand what works best for your system and your process. And that's what, again, product development and research and development is all about, is someone dedicated to do the work. There's no magical answer. And the last portion for your cake, not to put aside, is your leavening system. Properly done will create a cake that is lighter and fluffier. And the combination of the proper emulsification with the proper leavening and the proper sugar level and maybe the proper starches and colloids in your system is what will make your cake soft and fluffy. A good question. Moving on to the next question. So it's something on dough mixing. And there's an opinion that when dealing with dough that requires long fermentation hours, like panettone, the more gluten is developed up front, the easier it's going to be destroyed during the fermentation and of the presence of acids. Is this correct? If yes, why? The thinner gluten strands are, the easier it is to break down the bonds holding protein molecules together, question mark. So we're talking about panettone. The traditional panettone is a very long fermentation. And if you look back online, if you search through Google, you'll find a lot of panettone recipes using sourdough starters. So meaning long fermentation. But the question is whether or not, you should mix the panettone fully up front or let it do its work. So the way I've learned it is there are two ways of developing gluten. One is, and then working gluten enzymatically. So meaning if you were to take a flour and you take water and then you take your yeast without mixing it, you could just stir it and leave it there overnight without any mixing being done. And you're going to come and you'll see the gluten strand, moving, and then you'll see the gluten being formed. Or you can use the mechanical approach, which mechanically you will use a mixer, a dough hook, and you're putting energy to create the gluten. So either process are good. And to answer your question, yes, you're better off not mixing too much upfront, letting the enzymes work it, because if you have heavy mixing and plus a long fermentation time, you will weaken your gluten because the enzyme with the long fermentation will keep on working. And therefore, if you're already at the point of over mixing, is like we talked last week, being able to understand the mixing tolerance index and the stability of each flour you buy, which is in your certificate of analysis. When you buy flour, you can request it from the millers to understand how to best utilize your flour, because flours also have treatment, but flours also have stability. So if you were to look at your flour and you realize the stability, let's say it's 12 minutes and you're already mixing it 11 minutes, and then you're giving it an extra 12, 14 hours of fermentation, you will weaken your dough and your chance to have a nice high volume panettone. Good question though. I love a good panettone. And now for the last question of the day, protein in flour. I read it is preferable to add a small percent of lower protein flour to sourdough bread to increase the stability. How can that be if high protein flour is more stable? So I guess if I understand the question is someone read questions regarding on sourdough production or making sourdough, that a lower protein flour is preferred. Let me just talk about flour protein. Flour protein is a quantitative number. So that means it's a quantity. It's 11, 12, 13%. It's a number. And then there is gluten quality. I've seen, because I have a milling background in my career, that you could get a flour with a 9% protein and make a beautiful bread better than a 12% protein. Why? Because it is in the milling process. It is how the quality of the protein is preserved. And let's not be confused, like a lot of people say, oh, I'm going to add vital wheat gluten. I'm going to thinking you're just, again, it's a quantity, but you have to understand each protein has different functionality, and the way it's processed, it also has a different functionality. And that's why in the case of your sourdough, probably, you can find a high quality 10% versus another one. And it doesn't really matter. What matters is what works for you. Is if you find a good wheat variety. Remember, wheat, similar to wine, for those who enjoy wine, it's grown in different region. It gives different flavor and different experiences. And same thing as wheat. Wheat is far from just being a number. So it gives you flavor. We're talking about starch damage. We're talking about protein quality, protein quantity, and all of the analytical tools, the color of a wheat, how much ash. So there's a lot involved by selecting the right wheat. That's it. So thank you very much for your time today. Happy Tuesday to all of you and happy baking. Take care. Thank you.